Well, I'm back from my travels in Cornwall and straight into the news, and wow, is a lot changing. I've seen hydrogen generators, battery and PV powered chargers, and EV networks getting fed up with the grid and the DNOs and doing their own thing with ICPs. Plus, a dramatic change in what happens if you run out of battery charge out on the road, and, incredible as it sounds, with just 23 kilowatts available at home, do you fancy a 50 kilowatt charger of your own? Yeah, this is now possible. I kid you not. Keep watching. I'm Dave. Welcome to Dave Takes It On. Well, Renault are making great strides and getting very ambitious. I'll cover the launch of the Renault 5 shortly, but Luca De Meo, the Renault CEO, just announced he'd like to do a deal with Airbus. That's them that make the Airbus A320 that most of us use when we fly to Europe on holiday. Well, there are similarities and overlaps with the industries. Airbus by now are experts in exotic materials, offering tremendous strength and lightness, and that's essential in aircraft. Well, Luca seems to be offering a joint venture to try and reduce costs and advance development. Sounds like a really good idea. Let's see where that one leads. Fiat, meanwhile, blow hot and cold. 1 minute they're closing down factories, laying off 10% of their workforce. Next, they're launching a brand new line of EVs for the future. I keep saying it, and maybe one day someone will listen. The only reason Tesla launched a very expensive Roadster was to fund the development of the Model S and X, which in turn allowed them to fund the Model 3 that launched them as a mass-producing EV maker. And it was only because they just did not have the money to do it any other way. Fiat does, Stellantis does, Renault does, Ford certainly does, General Motors does. In fact, all of the legacy auto have the funds or access to credit to allow them to launch a really cheap, sub 20,000 pound, euros or dollars, whatever it is, mini or hatchback, and take the open market by storm. They should have a look back at their own history, see which of their models sold the most. Here's a clue. Ford Fiesta, 1.5 million. Ford Focus, over 1 million. Vauxhall Corsa, over 1 million. Volkswagen Golf, over 1 million. The Astra, 762,000. The Volkswagen Polo, over 700,000. The Mini, 700,000. In fact, of all the best-selling cars of all times, there's only a few outliers in there, one of which is the BMW 3 Series. Well done them, but that starts at about 40,000 now. And obviously the Model Y, the world's best-selling car at the moment. But most of the best-selling models of all time were all under £20,000, and only a few of them over around 25,000. So your mass market is below 20,000. And your highest profits turn out to be the luxury or sporty models of those budget cars. Don't go and waste money building new engine factories producing ICE that are just 3 or 4% more efficient but cost hundreds of millions to develop and years to get ready. Instead, just go straight to budget EVs. That's your market. Well, at last, realisation has hit home. All legacy auto have invested heavily in electrification, and now all of them, in unison, are openly stating that they don't want the 2035 ICE ban on new cars to be cancelled. They want it to come into force because they have invested heavily, and if it's changed now, if it's rolled back, they have just been shoveling huge sums of money straight down the drain. But of course, they do want subsidies and grants and tax breaks to make sure that they make a decent profit. Well, this is actually the end of the ICE era. It's now recognised, and it's the start of the clean EV transformation. So all you EV haters, give up. The inevitable has already happened. Well, talking of a decent profit, I see that Carlos Tavares, the CEO of Stellantis, him that pleads for more ICE and hybrids and less EVs, he's just been given a 56% pay rise. Or is that giving it to himself? Anyway, well, his workers certainly do not suffer too much. Average earnings in the factory are around €70,000. But his new pay rise takes his earnings to 518 times the average. That's significantly up from the previous year. Seems it's all right for some. Well, the highlight of the week was the Geneva Motor Show. It's actually a bit smaller this year than last for a variety of reasons, but it's quality, not quantity, that we want to see. So let's get back to Renault. They launched the Renault 5, and it is likely to be an instant success. First, it was an iconic car of its time. Small, nippy, 5-door hatchback, and with a supercharged variant for the boy racers. That's the Renault 5 Turbo. All at a cheap price, which, when it was last on sale, would have been the equivalent of about €15,000 for the basic model. So now they're back, and they're projecting the price to be around about €23,000 to €25,000. Little bit on the high side, but totally unlike the silly Mini, where the starting price of that's around €40,000. Well, these will sell, absolutely, they'll fly out. And if they want higher profit margins, they should just release an EV version of the Renault 5 Turbo, that with the massive wheel arches and a blistering performance. That too will be an all-time bestseller. Well, at last, someone appears to be listening to me where the true market is. Well, Dacia also seem to be getting some things right, but they're suffering from bad management decisions. See, France has offered some of the most generous grants and now offer incredible leasing deals to the poor and the needy. But the Dacia Spring is excluded as it's not European enough to qualify. Now they've dropped the price to compensate and give it a nice facelift and some extra features. It's going to sell, but Renault, who own Dacia, they really want those grants. So enter the Twingo EV. Oh, many of us will remember the Twingo. It was a tiny little thing, but immensely practical. It never really caught on over here, but in France it was everywhere. So enter the Twingo EV, and this is expecting to launch at a price of around, guess what, €17,000. And it's likely to be an instant hit. See, most of us never drive around with a full car, all 5 seats occupied. Most of our journeys are 1, occasionally 2 people. And for these, a small car is actually better. I think the Twingo is going to be a fantastic addition to the EV lineup. Now, if you are so stupid as to run out of battery out on the road, and how could anyone actually achieve this, then if you call the AA or the RAC, they'll come out and pick you up. They'll bring a low loader, they'll winch you onto the back of it eventually, and they'll deliver you to the nearest services or charger. They'll roll it off the back and push it to the nearest charger. Well, all that could take you a couple of hours in total. But now we have the first of the mobile vans with a decent onboard charger. ZPN Energy will shortly be launching a service. It's in London initially, and it will be a van equipped with a 50 kilowatt charger on board and a 50 kilowatt hour battery. Well, if you run out now, they'll come out to you, they'll give you a boost charge for a few minutes and load you enough to get you to the nearest charger. Or alternatively, you can get a full 50 kilowatt hour load off them in well under an hour and you're set for the week. Well, grid update. At the time of filming, the grid is using 46% renewables, only 34% fossil fuel, with nuclear making up another 10%. Who says EVs are simply transferring the pollution from the exhaust pipe to the power station? But look back a little bit further. Over the last week, renewables generated 35% against fossils 30%. And for the whole of last year, it was 36% renewable, 35% fossil. So sorry, all you doubters, the grid is actually going green at a rapid rate of knots. Well, is 2024 the year when Is 2024 the year when solid-state batteries finally make it into mass production? They are very different from what we use right now. They're proving to be immensely difficult to get into mass production, but the race is on. The biggest single difference that you or I will notice is the charging speed. See, current batteries, they need about 15 to 45 minutes, some of them up to an hour, to get a full charge, and that's down to the chemistry. Simply can't take any faster. But the solid-state batteries will achieve a full charge in just a couple of minutes, literally. Well, I spoke to National Grid recently, and they stated that they see solid-state batteries as a game changer. Just think, if you can't charge at home, you don't need to go hunting for a charger every night. Simply go and find one once a week and sit there for 2 minutes. Hardly got time to plug in and get back in the car before it's full. Likewise, if you stop on a motorway, you couldn't even get in the services for a toilet break in that sort of time. Well, this will throw a very different load onto the grid, but I am assured that someone in the grid is actually looking out for these and other changes that are going to occur in the demand. The grid in the future will look very different to what it is today. No matter how much they protest, DNOs are holding back the whole of the EV charging infrastructure in the UK. No matter what they say, they actually are. I have visited over a dozen charger installations in the last month that are totally finished, apart from the final connection to the grid, and some of these have been waiting for many months. But we're starting to see a number of efforts to counter this. First, Bodmin in Cornwall have a grid serve with a grid-connected battery and solar panels on the canopy, linked to a very low-power grid connection. And I filmed there recently. I found 4 cars charging simultaneously. One of them was pulling 180 kilowatts. That was using a combination of a very small amount from the grid, the rest from the battery and the PV panels. And it was pouring down that day. Another installation has already given up on DNOs and installed a hydrogen generator. And yet another one has got a diesel generator running on 100% plant-based biodiesel. Well, these innovations are gaining ground, and I will feature some of these in full-length videos in the future. Well, in the past, major chains like McDonald's, Tesco, Starbucks were all too happy to just lease out some of their car parks for an EV charging network to come along and install and run one or a few chargers, and presumably cream off some of the profits. Now a growing number of them have decided enough is enough. There's money to be made from EV charging. So they're forming their own EV charging networks, and they're paying themselves for the EV charger and the installation, and then keeping all the profits. You see, monopolies like GridServe, InstaVolt, Osprey, Ionity, they work in our favour for a short while, but after a period of time, it just begins to work against us. Well, the tide has now well and truly turned. Our EV charging infrastructure will look very different in 5 years' time. Just have some patience. Now we're heading to a bank holiday break, and that means chaos on the roads. It means double chaos for EV drivers who are experiencing a very poor charging network. There are too few chargers still, many of them underpowered, 50 kilowatts, shared bay, and far too many are broken and out of order. Now, we need the government to step in big time. We're not asking for help or extra grants, but you see, they paid out huge grants and subsidies to most of the EV charging networks to install these chargers. Yet an awful lot of them have never worked properly. An awful lot of others have already failed. These are only months old and already they're falling apart. Face it, government, they took full advantage of you. They grabbed your money and installed rubbish. Get yourself into action and demand the money back if the chargers you have paid them to install are not hitting the 99% uptime that you have specified. Get tough. Don't be weak. Don't follow the weak example of President Biden in giving them further grants and subsidies to go and correct all the failings that they ripped you off for in the first place. You just need to simply set a deadline for when they all must be working, or you just claim back all the grants and subsidies until they are. Well, finally, fancy a 50 kilowatt rapid charger in your home? Well, soon you will be able to. Now, it sounds silly because a typical house has 230 volts coming in and a 100 amp fuse protecting it. But a grid informed me recently that instead of the theoretical 23 kilowatts supply, they actually only allocate you 18 kilowatts, which is equivalent of 80 amps. And we cope very well on this. I've never had my circuit trip because I've been overloading it. We just don't use 18 kilowatts. So the question is, how can you run a 50 kilowatt rapid charger off 18 kilowatts? And the answer is batteries. You install a decent power home battery and combine the output of the grid, the 18 kilowatts, and the rest coming from the battery, and you can really get 50 kilowatts supply, meaning you can now charge an average EV in less than an hour, or you can charge multiple EVs overnight. Plus, of course, you get a cheap overnight rate, and you charge the batteries on that same cheap rate. So you can use a 50 kilowatt home charger costing you 7.5 pence per kilowatt hour. You know, I need one of these. And in fact, that might actually be a little business venture for someone. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'm Dave. Well, thanks very much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, please click the like button. And if you would, please subscribe. It makes such a difference to us as a new channel. If you click the bell icon, the notification, you'll be notified the next time we launch a video. And a massive, massive, massive thank you, last but not least, to our Patreon members. This side of the business is growing dramatically. We've had our most successful month ever, and thank you so much for your support for the channel. I'm Dave.